The story begins with Banri, the protagonist who arrives late at the opening ceremony of his university's law faculty. As a result, he doesn't get a chance to talk to anyone, and in addition, he doesn't know how to get to his university. In that, he overhears some girls heading towards the same faculty, so he decides to follow them. However, he loses sight of them in a store, where he spends some time buying things, while the girls are leaving the store. He remains lost outside the place, until he encounters Mitsuo Yanagisawa, a young man who, like him, was also following the same girls but lost their trail in the same store as him. Quickly, they become friends, and head together to the university. There, we learn that Janice, as Yanagisawa prefers to be called, attended the same school his whole life, but transferred due to problems with a friend. Suddenly, a taxi arrives at high speed, and a beautiful girl carrying a bouquet of roses steps out. The protagonist is surprised when the girl starts hitting him with the bouquet, while congratulating him on entering the university. Before leaving, she tells him that she will always be his. The boy picks up the bouquet and starts giving roses to the passing girls to ease the situation, while Janice, still in shock on the ground, realizes this, and starts helping him. Once they are in class, Janice explains to the protagonist about this girl, whose name is Koko, who already has her life planned out, and is quite obsessive. We can see that Janice seems deeply traumatized by her. As they discuss this, a girl speaks to them from behind, who turns out to be Koko herself. Even though Janice doesn't believe her, she explains that she changed her plans to study with him for the next 4 years. Janice is frightened, runs away, and ends up throwing all his notes, and the girl starts chasing him. Left alone, the protagonist starts picking up all his friends' notes, and that's when Shinami Oka, another classmate, appears and helps him, becoming his friend. After leaving the faculty, the boy encounters a festival of clubs, where each group tries to force them to join. Just as the protagonist is about to be cornered by the Latin dance club, he is rescued by Nana Hayashida, a girl in her senior year the law faculty, who says that her club doesn't force anyone to join, and that it's their duty to help newcomers. Before leaving, she asked him to call her Rinda, and our protagonist flirts with her, complimenting her lipstick, to which she blows him a kiss. As the evening falls, and on his way home, the protagonist meets Koko, who explains that she's waiting for Janice. At that moment, Janice calls him on his cell phone, and informs him that he's still at school. Koko overhears the conversation, so she takes the protagonist's phone, and tells Janice that she'll come to find him. Before leaving with the boy's phone, she returns it, and acts sweet and polite towards him. After this, our protagonist watches her leave, and remembers the time he was hit by a motorcycle years ago, while he was waiting for someone. The next day, we see a dream of our protagonist, where he falls off cliff, with his eyes blindfolded. In that, he is found by someone, but then the image of Koko comes to his mind, and he wakes up thinking about her. The week passes, and one day at the university, he sees Koko laughing alone at her phone, so he approaches and asks what she's doing. Then she shows her photos of her and Janice when they were children, and asks if she has seen him because he's been avoiding her. At that moment, we see Janice's passing behind her, making signals to our protagonist not to say anything. The boy tries to distract her, but she still notices, and starts chasing Janice. Inside the university, she can't catch the guy, so she asked our protagonist to find out his schedule, offering to pay him. However, since he doesn't want to, she tells him it was just a joke, and she goes to her class. However, when Koko leaves, the boy overhears everyone talking about her, and how her parents have a lot of money. Then we see that Rinda is standing behind him, observing everything that's happening. Days pass, and we see our boy at his home giving food to his friend Janice, since his parents don't give him any money because he was transferred to another university, to get away from Koko. The protagonist says to him that he feels bad for the girl, because she hasn't made any friends, and nobody talks to her. This leads to a small argument between them, but eventually, Janice understands the protagonist POV, so he invites him to a welcome ceremony at the film club. Once they are at the meeting, Janice decides to join the film club, and they find out that Oka belongs to the same club. While they are there, the protagonist hears a lot of noise coming from the next room. Despite being warned by the film club members that it's a club of demons, he approaches, and the door opens to reveal the girls from the tea club, who are completely out of control. They end up taking the protagonist to their party. At the party, they have several men serving as butler, but the boy refuses to drink with them. Instead, they make him fight another guy, who ends up saying that he hates real girls, and he will only be interested in 2D girls, for which they end up calling him 2D boy. The next day, Janice meets the protagonist on the way to the university, and tells him that he ended up going to 5 parties that night, with the girls from the tea club. In that, Janice notices that Koko is looking for him. That's why he says to the protagonist that he will hide, and ask him not to tell her where he is. After classes, the protagonist wants to go home, when suddenly, he is cornered again by all the university clubs, but Rinda saves him again, loudly declaring that he belongs to her club, the Cultural Research Club. When she realizes he doesn't remember her name, she becomes a bit sad, but then changes her mind, and invites him to go out. However, he notices that Koko is alone waiting for Janice, so Rinda sends him to go to talk to her. The protagonist sits next to Koko, and she proceeds to tell him that she feels invisible in the university, because she only knows Janice, but he doesn't even talk to her, and no one else dares to talk to her. The boy suggests to her to go together to a club welcome event, so she can meet people, and just then, another girl appears, and invites them for coffee. At the cafe, this girl talks to them for hours about her club, and eventually invites them to their 3-day, 2-night, welcome party. She admits that she's not from their university, but she enjoys talking to people from other universities. After leaving the cafe, they both agree to go together and meet people there in the cafe. The day of the trip to the mentioned party arrives, and the protagonist arrives first, then Koko appears and asks him if Janice knows about the trip. The boy shows her a message from Janice, and she gets excited, thinking that he's thinking about her. Just then, they see the 2D boy, who is with a group of people going on the same trip, and the protagonist proceeds to introduce Koko to him. They find out that the 2D boy's real name is Takaya Satu, but from now on, we will just name him Takaya. After that, some white cars arrive, and the club members get out, instructing everyone to fill out forms with their information, and get into the cars. When they are traveling, our protagonist starts to suspect something, because they deviate from the real route, and end up in a place that looks like a mansion. Eventually, everyone realizes that they are in the clutches of a religious sect, and they are being held hostage against their will. The group locks their luggage, and subjects them to lectures, before taking them to dinner. During dinner, some of the guys who went on the trip started to complain, while the protagonist is worried about Koko, so he comes up with a plan. He pretends to be a believer of their religious sect, and shares his story about the accident he had, and how he lost most of his memory on it. He demands that anyone who doesn't want to be there should be allowed to leave. The sect members believe him and release all the people, including Koko. However, just when the boy thought he had saved the girl, she returns, saying to him that she wants to stay, just because she knew that he was only pretending and didn't want to leave him alone. They return to the dining hall, and the protagonist takes advantage of the fact that the sect members are drunk, to ask for the key to their luggage. They give it to him, but the girl who invited them to the party in the first place decides to accompany them. Because of this, they start running until they reach the room where their luggage is kept, and finally escape through a window. Once outside, they run far away until they lose sight of the sect, but they still have no signal on their phones to contact someone. While walking, they start talking about Janice, and what Koko really feels for him, showing that she cares deeply for him. She also shows a playful and cheerful side of her that she doesn't show when she's with Janice. Later, the girl asks him about his life, to which the protagonist tells her that the accident part of the story was real, and he has no memories of anything, but he says to her that he's fine like that, because he likes to not worry about tragic things. After talking for a while, they see some lights in the distance. They hesitate to approach, thinking they might be some member from the sect, but they end up finding Rinda. The day of the trip, the protagonist tells us that they were rescued by Rinda, who was at the university's summer house where her club was having a welcome celebration, very close to where they were. The next day, the protagonist arrives at the university, and is warmly welcomed by his friends. While they are in the faculty cafeteria, Janice tells the boy that he was so worried that he even wrote to Koko. The protagonist tells him that she must be very happy, and he reflects on the previous day, even thinking that Janice hates him. Later, Takaya goes to class, and Janice tells Oka that since they both don't have classes until the afternoon, they can accompany each other. Koko appears, and a jealous scene unfolds, as mistreats and threatens Oka, until Janice intervenes and defends Oka, leaving with her. He stays behind because he needs to talk to Koko, to thank Rinda's club members for rescuing them. After his friends leave, Koko is visibly nervous and sweaty. After washing up in the bathroom, she talks to our protagonist, confessing that she always does things to make Janice hate her more, and that she can't stop herself. They decide to thank Rinda, and once they are with her, she invites them to join her club, but they decide to visit it first. They arrive at the club room, and express their gratitude, and are invited to participate in the Oha dance. After leaving the club, the protagonist tells Koko that she doesn't know how to dance, and he intends to join that club. However, she doesn't want to join it because she wants to enter Janice's club and change his mind. Days later in class, we see that Janice is interested in dating Oka, and tells our protagonist that he will finally end things with Koko, to have a formal and stable relationship with her, which worries our protagonist. Days pass, and Koko doesn't attend classes, until one day, she invites our boy to a cafe. At the cafe, they find her with the protagonist and Janice. Koko wants to explain to Janice why they should be together, and shows him childhood photos and memories of her time together. However, he interrupts her, saying he likes Oka, and wants a relationship with her. This news shocks Koko, who tries to remind him of everything they shared, but Janice explains that precisely because of that, they can't be in a relationship. He tells her that she's special to him, and he can't fall in love with her. This makes Koko think that he hates her, and she ends up yelling at him, grabbing him, and crying. Janice leaves, and she stays behind, apologizing to our protagonist, who waits patiently for her to calm down. Hours pass, and they have to leave, but she says she wants to die. Then, a gothic-looking girl named Nana appears, and tells her that she wants to die, she should go to her rock concert. At the concert, Koko goes wilding, painting herself black, tearing her pants, and even going on stage to insult Janice, until Nana throws her off stage, and she's removed from the venue. The protagonist takes her to her house and sleeps on the floor, while she rests on the bed. While they are there, she starts crying, realizing that she was wrong to impose her desires on Janice, who also has feelings. He tells her he understands because he too is afraid of rejection, which is why he distanced himself from everyone when he lost his memory. He also tells her that when his memories return, the current version of him will disappear. She asks him not to forget her, and he assures her he never will because he likes her and cares about her deeply. She's surprised by his words, but they continue talking normally. Later, Koko goes back to her house, and sends a message to our protagonist, saying, "You're afraid of being rejected because you also reject them." The next day, our boy takes a train and goes to his parents' house. When he arrives, he goes to his room, where he sees his yearbook, and some photos fall out. As he picks them up, he realizes they are photos of him with Rinda from years ago. Upon seeing those photos, the protagonist runs off to the bridge, where he had his accident. There, he begins to wonder why he doesn't remember anything, and what relationship he had with Rinda. At that moment, he calls Janice and starts crying. Meanwhile, we can see the ghostly version of his old self observing him. The ghostly protagonist tells us that when he had the accident, he was separated from his body like a soul, and can only watch the empty shell of the new protagonist living his life, but he cannot communicate with him. Meanwhile, on a train returning home, our protagonist receives a message from Koko, asking to talk. Later, he arrives at the cafe where Koko is waiting for him. She tells him that they just met, and she wants them to be good friends. She gives him one of the 2 makeup mirrors they were able to bring when they escaped from the sect. The protagonist accepts the offer of friendship and the gift as well. The next day, while Janice and her boy are heading to the university, Janice expresses concern about Koko, feeling that she might have gone overboard with her actions. They run into her at the university's cafeteria, and she overly exaggerates their friendship, until Rinda calls her and explains that she's helping Koko plan her class schedule. The protagonist stays, observing her, and instead of bringing up the photo, he introduces her to Janice. Koko asks Janice about his class schedule, and upon finding out that he's in a class with a very difficult professor, he gets scared and runs off to try to change to a different class. Rinda offers them again to join her club, and this time, Koko accepts on behalf of both of them. The scene shifts to the club room, where they introduce themselves and start dancing. Koko thinks the dance is simple, but when they begin, she moves like a robot, showing that she's terrible at dancing. After leaving the club, Koko confronts our protagonist, upset because he's her best friend, and knows how to dance while she doesn't. She bursts into tears, and he realizes that she's carrying a lot on her shoulders, as not much time has passed since her rejection. Later, they go to a cafe, and she apologizes for her earlier behavior. The protagonist lends her his makeup mirror, and she's happy to see that she uses it. Koko explains that she's trying to sort out her feelings, which is causing a complete mess. He understands, and she keeps talking, saying she hopes to become more like Rinda, as she can see that Rinda is popular, and probably has a boyfriend. Once our boy is back at his home, he thinks about Rinda, and wonders why she pretends not to know him. He also recalls how he used to escape from the hospital every night, following a light outside the window. He would find a girl there who told him that she studies at the University of Tokyo, and advised him to study there too. He realizes that the girl was Rinda, making him question the nature of their relationship. We go back to the antagonist past, where we see that he is a sensitive and fearful person, and Rinda takes care of him always. On the last day of classes, they have a farewell with their friends, and at the end, the boy confesses his feeling to Rinda, and tells her he accepts going to Tokyo, so they can study together. Rinda asks him to let her think about it, and he replies that he'll wait for her the next day at the bridge as always. Meanwhile, the ghostly protagonist watches his current self sleeping, and tells us that he was in love with Rinda, even though she only saw him as a friend, just like what's happening with Koko. The next day, Koko and her boy meet at the university cafeteria, and Oka arrives to invite them to a party. Koko declines the invitation, that the protagonist accepts. In private, the boy asks Oka why she's inviting Koko when she treats her poorly, suspecting that Oka might have bad intentions. However, Oka says she wants to be Koko's friend and mend things, so he agrees to help her get Koko to come to the party. On the day of the party, Oka knows a lot of people, and Koko is also there because the protagonist invited her. However, she immediately starts arguing with Janice, who is also present. Koko challenges Janice to confess his feelings to Oka, as she thinks he's only pretending to like Oka to distance himself from her. Out of frustration, Janice calls Oka over, and asks her to be his girlfriend in front of everyone at the party. Oka takes it as a joke, and both Janice and Koko become upset. Our boy and Takaya intervene and take them to the next room, where the tea club was once again. Afterward, Oka starts recording everything for her club, and at the end of the party, we see that Janice and Koko ended up drunk just as the protagonist and Takaya were for the first time. On their way home, Koko is drunk, and despite the boy wanting her to go home, she insists on going to his place to badmouth Janice's all night. He becomes tired of her behavior, and asks to no longer be friends, while returning her makeup mirror. There she refuses to accept it. He tells her it was a mistake to become friends again after she rejected him, and calls a taxi for her, and says he won't wait for anyone before walking away. The next day, Rinda notices they are distant, but when she tries to talk to the protagonist, he explodes and reproaches her for treating him as if she didn't know him from before. After this, he runs off, and she follows him, until he locks himself in the bathroom. Inside the bathroom, she blames herself for the accident he had, and tells him that she went to the bridge the next day to give him an answer, but arrived too late. Later, as it gets dark, Rinda leaves the university, and Koko is waiting for her at the door. However, Koko is ignored by Rinda when she exits. Similarly, our protagonist ignores her too when he leaves, but she starts following him, and he runs away. Unable to catch up with him, Koko takes someone else's bike, and continues to pursue him. Meanwhile, our boy runs without knowing where to go, until he reaches a bridge. Contemplating that if he falls again, he could fix everything and be himself again. At that moment, when he's on the edge of the bridge, Koko appears, and hits him with a bike, preventing him from jumping. She tells him not to leave her, and that she wants to be with him forever, and that she loves him. After this, the guy with the bicycle arrives with a police officer, and accuses Koko of stealing the bike, leading her to the police station. At the police station, while waiting for Koko's father to arrive, she apologizes to our protagonist for all the trouble, and explains that at the party, she wasn't thinking about Janice. She was just angry that Oka easily got what she had been struggling to achieve, and thought she might lose him too. She confesses that she didn't want to acknowledge her feelings for him, and that it would be fair if he rejected her, but he refuses to do so. Koko's father arrives, and after taking her out of the station, he apologizes to the protagonist, and hopes they can still be friends. However, Koko corrects him, stating that they are actually dating. But that's where the video ends. I will be doing more parts, so make sure to subscribe to not miss them. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.